Hey guys, so we're going to talk about open vented S plans. Okay, so we're going to talk about those. Cool. So an S plan incorporates two port valves. Effectively, they're just open or closed. There's no other way. You send power to it. It opens a motor, which then allows the water through, and then tells the boiler to fire up. All right. The great thing about two port valves is you can have two, you can have one, you can have five, you can have six, you can have 10, you can have 100 of them if you really wanted to. They effectively just work on the same way. It's just repeated over and over again. Power sent to them, they're told to open. That then hits a micro switch, which then tells the boiler and pump to come on. Okay, these are normally controlled by a room stat or a cylinder stat. So you would say, for example, have a cylinder stat here. The power would come in, the cylinder stat there, and then it would go out and then into our valve. Okay, that's not a very good drawing, but hey. So what is an open vented system? Okay, so let's talk about this here. So you look at it and go, oh, I don't know what all that does. So let's break it down. So first thing, water main. Oh, let me get some color. So here, that's our water main. Okay, so our water comes in, goes up. We got a little, an isolation valve, an ISO valve there. Always have an isolation valve because we've got a ball valve, which we need to service, and they break a lot. It goes through into our ball valve, which then fills up this tank, which is called a feed and expansion tank. Okay, that then allows the system to fill up. Okay, right. So now let's talk about our flow and return. So all the red pipes are flow, because red is hot, and our returns are blue. So what we have off our boiler, our flow comes up. It all goes down into our pump and goes off to our two ports, which one is for our heating and one is for our hot water. It also has this pipe up here, right? So what happens is, when this water expands, it goes up. It expands up the tube or up the 22mm pipe. That needs to be 22mm, guys. All right. If that's 15mm, then obviously you won't get enough expansion, and the water will just eventually just keep going up and up and up, and then going into your F&E tank. Okay. So that's called our feed and expansion. Also, if this boiler overheats, it will then send the steam or the water up here. So it's a safety device as well. We're not allowed any valves or anything on that. It needs to be just a piece of pipe that goes up and over into our F&E tank. Okay, so now what we have, if our timer and our cylinder stat say we want some heat, the water is allowed through into our tank and then goes back down to our boiler and then gets reheated, and then back up. Okay, if our room stat says, it's too cold, we want some heat and it's time to come on, the two-port valve opens, allows the water to flow through into our radiator and then back, as you can see there. Okay, and obviously to this radiator as well. So, what happens, let's just get rid of all this. Let's just clean that up a bit. What happens is, if, for some reason, this turns off and this turns off, but this boiler is still hot because the hot water and heating's been off. This pump is still running. What happens is, the water goes down this little bypass here and then goes down. Okay, so with two ports, you need to have a bypass. The bypass is there, so if they both shut at the same time, that allows the heat in the boiler to dissipate. Okay, cool. So what we're going to talk about now is some wiring, stuff like that. Okay. So first thing we're going to talk about is the earth. So we're going to separate it down into individual stages. That's the easiest way of doing it. No point looking at it and going, oh, that's just a big pile of spaghetti. So first thing we do, earth. We got our earth coming in from our mains, obviously. So let's link all our earths together. All right. So I'm going to put our earth. So our first one goes in like this. So I'll try to draw as best I can, as straight as I can. So our earth goes into our wiring center. Our earth from our pump also can go into our wiring center. When you're doing these, also just make sure you don't put too many wires in one block. All right, what I would use, you can use Wagos or something like that to link them if you need to. If you've got lots of them, then maybe just use a Wago block or something like that, rather than trying to squeeze them into lots of different, like loads of cables in one hole, and then it just makes a mess. All right, so we've got our earth to our pump. Then we'll put in our earth to our boiler. And as you can see here, I've gone into a different slot, right? So what you would then do, you could put in a link like that, or you could like put in a little Wago and then just have one cable going into there, or just link it all on a Wago block or something like that. All right, just try to make it neat. Take your time with it. All right. So now we've got a couple of earths from. Oh, that's the wrong one. Wrong color. Oh, wrong colour again. What's going on here? There we go, that's better. So now an earth goes into our... Oh, let's rub that out. Look. Let's do that again. That's better, look. Try to do a neat job, or fairly neat job. So we've got our earth going to our 3-port, or 2-port, sorry. And then we've got another earth that goes into this 2-port valve and into our wiring center. Sometimes on room stats you have earths, sometimes on programs you have earths, but you just need to check what you have. If you have an earth, just add it in. Okay, so now we've done our earths, we're going to look at our neutrals. Okay, so now we're going to do neutrals, very similar to the earths. Link them all together. Obviously, blue cable. They all go up into here. Then we do the programmer. On this one, we have a lot more. So the programmer has a neutral as well. I'm just going to run this up into here. I try to keep the wires spaced out. So use like Wago blocks or a bigger wiring center, something like that. I think sometimes you look at it and go, oh, well, I want a small wiring center. But if you put a bigger one in, you can make a nice, neater job of it. Yes, it takes up more space, but it looks less in the long run. All right, I've actually done this a bit wrong, but that's all right. And then it goes up and then in. And then obviously we have our neutral to our programmer. And we'll just run into there like that. And then we have our neutral from our 2-port valves. So these are connected to our motor. And these will already be connected. There will be a cable that comes with the motor, the 3-port valve. And they're automatically connected. So and that's pretty much all our neutrals done, as you can see. So I'd have to link them together because I'll have to link them together. Oh, sorry, that's my phone. So I'd have to link them together like that. But you can see I've only put like 2 cables max into each little chock block. I wouldn't put any more than that, else you're just going to make a mess. All right, let's move on to the next one. So now what we're going to talk about, we're just going to quickly talk about our permanent lives. So these are the ones that are constantly live, always live, unless you turn it off. All right. So first of all, we take our live from our fuse spur, connect it into our wiring center. We then come out of our wiring center, and then we go into our programmer. Okay. Not there. That is a neutral. Donut. See, it's very easy to make mistakes when you're not concentrating. Okay, there we go. So it now goes into our programmer. We also, not on all boilers, but some boilers need a permanent live. So we're also going to put a permanent live in for the boiler, as you can see there. So we've now got a permanent live. Again, so what we need to do is put a little link in there. We also need 2 grey wires for our permanent lives for the 2-port valves, which when you buy the 2-port valves, they come as standard. So as you can see, I've got my greys that are also permanent live. Okay. There we go. Let's do this one. Last one, permanent live. There we go. Okay. So now we've got all our permanent lives done. All right. Sometimes the rooms that may need it, just depends on what you've got. Sometimes if they're like programmable room stat, something like that, that's wired maybe. But again, I'm just going to show you a basic outline. Okay. So what we're going to talk about now is switching. So now what we're going to talk about is the switching. Okay, so what we currently have, let's just go through what we currently have. So our electric goes from our live into our wiring center, through our wiring center, and then in to our valve. Okay, as you can see that. Right, so let's get rid of that. Okay, so how does it then go from in, say, our wiring sensor? It's got a switch wire coming out, which is called switch live on orange. That then goes in to our switch live on our boiler. So let me do it again. So comes out, our 2-port goes in, and then tells our boiler to fire up. Okay, so now what happens? We have our electric coming in here, but it can't get down to the orange wire until this little pink switch here is made. So we now need to get electric in here. Okay, and that's what we're going to talk about next. Okay, so now what we're going to do is the final step. All right, so we're going to talk about central heating, and then we'll talk about hot water. But we're now going to talk about how the actual central heating and hot water actually come on. What tells them to come on? What tells them to fire the boiler up? Okay, so we have our central heating on, which comes out and goes into our programmer. All right. That's not very neat, but I'll get my ruler up now. Look, that's better. And then it goes out of our programmer, into our wiring center, and then into our room stat. It then goes out of our room stat, and it goes to our 2-port valve. So it goes back, and then it goes to the motor of the 2-port valve. As you can see here, it goes into the motor of the 2-port valve. Okay, so now what we need is for the timer to allow see, we've got electric here, you see. So we've got So we've got our electric. This is my electric. So I've got electric here. But at the moment it's stopped because the time isn't right. It's not telling it to come on. So as soon as the timer or programmer says it's right to come on, the micro switch will flick across. It will then allow the electric all the way to our room stat. So we've got our timer saying yes, it's time to come on. Does it need to come on? Is it already too hot in the house? If we set our temperature to say 18 degrees, but the house is 21 degrees, it's not going to come on, right? Because we don't need the heat. We don't want the heat. It's already too hot. But if it's say 15 degrees and we set the house to 18 degrees, it's gonna say I want some heat. It's gonna call for heat. So the micro switch is off here. That micro switch will then flick across if it's calling for heat, which then allows electric to go through to our motor here. Our motor then turns this little micro switch here, then moves across. So remember, this grey is permanent live, right? So this grey is permanent live. So now the electric can go down and into our boiler and fire the boiler up. Okay, what you also have, depending on what type of system you have, it might also go off to the pump if there's a separate pump, or in more modern boilers, the pump is already linked to the boiler because it's internal. So if it's separate, then you would need that orange wire also to turn the pump on, but if not, then it would be inside the boiler. Okay, so we're going to leave that there, and then we're going to talk about the hot water, which is exactly the same, just different stats. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the hot water. Pretty much exactly the same as the central heating. So we have a hot water alive coming out of our room stat, or our programmer, sorry. Goes into our wiring center, then comes out, goes into our stat, then comes out, goes back into our stat, then comes back out and into our motor. Okay, so now all we need to do is, get it working. So we have electric that's coming in here. Again, it's stopped at the timer because the timer is not ready to come on. As soon as it's ready to come on, the switch will flick over. That will then allow electric through into our room stat, cylinder stat. The cylinder stat, if the water's at 65 degrees and you only want it at say 60 degrees, then it's not going to come on. But if it's too cold and it says I need some heat because the water's too cold, it will then flick across. That flick across like that. That will then allow the electric to pass through, and exactly the same as central heating, to the motor. Allows the motor to turn. That motor moves that switch over to there. And remember, our grey is permanent live. That permanent live is then connected to the orange, which is then goes down into our pump and our boiler. And remember, sometimes the pump might be integrated. So, just to recap, the way I always like to think of these is, this is the first step here. So this is number 1. Always starts there. Then number 2 is our stats. Okay? Once it's gone through there and it's allowed through, it then goes to our 2 ports. If that's satisfied and it works, then it will go at our boiler and our pump. Okay, so I always look at it, it goes on a journey and it has to meet certain criteria to get from there. All right, cool. If you need any help with anything, guys, leave me a message and we can go from there.